for Global Business Update. Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Over to you, Mr. Wilson.
Yes, good morning. Australia stock's doing actually rather well, but most things are actually clearly quite focused on what the chairman of the Fed, Jay Powell, is going to say in Jackson Hole in Wyoming at the Central Bankers Symposium. That's our and your time, round about lunchtime today, or at least this afternoon. But Australia stock's actually leading the way. There's an interesting story out of China. China tech stocks like Alibaba, JD.com and Baidu have been jumping on the fact that it could be that maybe there's going to be some kind of agreement between the United States and China on share audits. You remember that the US drew up a list of companies it would not allow to trade on the New York Stock Exchange unless they agree to company audits. Well, it may be that some kind of agreement is being reached there. We did the news yesterday, I think, about Japan pivoting back to nuclear power. The IEA has now said, the International Energy Authority has now said, it'll actually cool the gas markets. Been welcomed by the International Energy Agency, and this is basically the fact that it's a long time since the Fukuyama disaster. Things have changed since then. Energy demands have changed since then. Energy sources have changed since then. So it may be that Japan goes back to that. Remember, it is the world's third largest economy. So as far as the United States is concerned, yes, of course, everybody looking forward to Jackson Hole. Stock futures, little change today. The Dow up 300 points yesterday. Not quite sure why. People are actually seeing it as quite a good time to buy equities at the moment. They're staying clear of the government bond markets because they don't really know what's going on. But the United States, still the main guarantor, for example, of Taiwan's security. And after those PLA drills that we saw during and after Nancy Pelosi's visit to the island, apparently there are no good options for the United States. So that's a big geopolitical thought to take into the weekend. A judge has ruled in Delaware that Twitter must give more information to Elon Musk about the true level of its accounts. He asked for a lot more. The judge said that some of his demands were absurdly broad, but bottom line is that he may get some more information. And the trial is set for October the 7th. If you remember, he was bidding $44 billion for the company. Its market value collapsed to $32 billion in May after his inquiries, and people actually not really sure about what the true level of Twitter users actually is. Geopolitically, more ships are going to be carrying grain out of Ukraine. 5 more ships are set to leave Ukraine's ports for exports. The world rather is experiencing the worst food security crisis any of us actually seen. That's according to the US ambassador to the UN. Putin himself has called for, has issued a decree for further people to join. Further people must join the army in Russia. ECB minutes yesterday showed that the ECB is worried about low inflation. It had a marginal increase of about 0.5% a while ago, and what people are worried about there, what the bankers are worried about, what the people who sit on the ECB committee are worried about clearly is inflation as far as the EU is concerned at the moment. If you remember, they're obviously trying to move away from printing money. There's this new thing called a transmission production instrument. It may well have to be applied to Italy, as we were discussing yesterday, where a lot of hedge funds are actually betting against the economy in Ity right now because of the political problems there. UK energy latest, the price cap is now 80% rise, 80%. It represents a rise of 80% on the current cap of 1,971. It's now capped at £3,549 a year. This varies according to the kind of accounts that people actually have, but it applies to 24 million households. There may be a new scheme not to pay these increases back for maybe 20, 25 years. I mean, these are things which are pushing these debts further into the future, and also the the distance between the various price caps is now reduced to 3 months, which is supposed to give the energy companies more chance to regulate or be regulated. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But there are all sorts of questions to be asked about the energy markets. And this will no doubt, whoever wins the prime ministerial election in the UK, this will be his or her major priority. There's absolutely no question about that. UK markets, if you look at what the gilt markets are saying, and most of all what the credit default swaps markets are saying, again, sounds highly technical, but they're looking at interest rates probably 4% by next May. Two strikes of note in the UK beginning one continuing, one beginning. The Royal Mail is actually striking. 115,000 Royal Mail workers are on strike at the moment, and also train drivers at 3 more companies have voted on behalf of strike action. As far as commodities are concerned, oil is still really digesting this message that we were getting from Saudi about them possibly cutting their oil production. That's from Abdul Aziz bin Salman, who's the energy minister in Saudi. This was sort of directed towards the markets, which he feels are still too volatile. And I'll just close by talking about cryptos and Bitcoin. Now, we've heard about the crypto winter, and there's been a lot of problems with the outside of these things. I was talking to some experts in the market this week about cryptos, and being usually, as I am, usually cynical about them. And he says, when you stop worrying about the details, you stop worrying about the geek stuff, and you start thinking about the possibilities of transparent invoicing, transparent expenses, and all the rest of it, it does actually make a lot of sense. And although a lot of the minor players have been forced out, some of the experts are saying that it's getting rid of the kids, as it were, is probably quite good, and it is becoming an asset class, provided you don't get caught up in the geek technology. It was explained to me, for example, that when you get on an aeroplane, you don't worry about the inner workings of the jet engine. My point of view is, yeah, sure, that's because many people get on planes, and at the moment, Bitcoin is not a part of mass circulation. That's the global view as we go into the weekend.
Okay, first, the announcement from Ofgem, we're still expecting that, but it's interesting that the two leading Tory...
I told you what I told you. I did actually just tell you that. It's up 80%, yeah.
Yes, 80% rise. Yes, that's true. Yeah, well, the two leading Tory candidates, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, they both promised that, this will be the first thing that they will deal with. But Liz Truss has refused to provide the details. But certainly, businesses and persons living, in the UK will expect that something will be done to alleviate their suffering beyond the £400 per household that is already in place. But there's also the unresolved matter of the Northern Ireland Protocol, which the Liz Truss group referred to. The speculation that when Liz Truss succeeds, if she succeeds, that one of the first things she will do will be to invoke Article 16 to protect UK businesses and to protect the plan to use post-Brexit agreements to cause trade issues on the Irish Sea. Can we trust that this will happen? Because the UK has up till September 15, I think, 10 days after a new leader shows up to address the legal action that has been put in place by the EU Commission. Are we likely to find ourselves in a situation of a very bitter trade war between the EU and the UK in the new dispensation that is likely to come into place? Again, you're taking me into political areas which I don't profess to be knowledgeable about. But as far as trade is concerned, what I hope will happen is that we are not within the bounds of the EU or the EC, perhaps more correctly put, and that free trade is encouraged between Northern Ireland and the UK mainland. That's what I would like to see out of this. She said for a long time this is what she's going to do, and again the time limit comes down. There is a lot of work to do. I think that's certainly one thing, but the absolute 100% upfront
job of anybody who gets into power in this country is dealing with the energy crisis. It's something which is going to hit the rest of the world. The food crisis will hit the rest of the world. We're not suffering too much with the UK at the moment, but certainly energy is, not as much as it is in the EU, because, but we're going to, this will define a lot of things. One, it will define whether or not this person turns out to be a good leader in the UK. And two, it will actually define how much power Putin actually has over Europe and over the UK in terms of weaponizing energy, which he's done so far and very successfully. So I think the next few months are going to be very, very interesting indeed. I suspect a lot of people in the UK will heading to the shops and getting big woolly jumpers.
Okay, Mr. Wilson, Elon Musk seemed to be scavenging for excuses to just renege like he has done in his effort to buy Twitter. What's likely to be the outcome of this court issue, now that it has been given some leeway to get more information from the company? That's Twitter.
I think if you and I had been bidding for it, then we might have done this due diligence slightly out of the headlines, certainly not in social media. Isn't it ironic that everything has been played out on social media concerning a social media company? I do find that rather strange. But, I mean, if the judge, as I reported in Delaware, is saying that what Twitter has to do is to supply Musk with extra information about the level of real or imagined users that it actually has. It's as simple as that. He's not been allowed to ask to get more broad requests, which we don't know what those were because the court chose not to reveal them. But at the moment, he's doing that now. Whether this brings down the price that he's prepared to pay for Twitter, already the company's been devalued, as I said, from 44. The value that he thought it was, £44 billion, what he paid for it, down. The company is down to, I think, $32 billion in terms of market capitalization as a result of all this. And it's just the lawyers that are making money. Anyway, it will come to court in October, and it should be quite clear then, because if I were Musk, I would not be going into a courtroom or sending my lawyers into a courtroom without a clear indication of what Twitter actually is and what it actually stands for.
Adesua?
Michael Wilson, I mean, risky assets and cryptocurrencies. Let's talk about the warm winter. How is it likely to be different from the previous winters?
You mean as far as cryptos are concerned?
Yes, cryptocurrency, yes.
Okay, right. So what I was referring to was this metaphor of a cold winter for cryptos, because they were seen not to be particularly a big hedge against inflation. They were not the new digital gold, and a lot of people just got involved in them, like the meme stocks that we used to talk about, and it went. So therefore, the metaphor was, it wasn't anything to do with the calendar, it was a metaphor for crypto winter. Now, what appears to be happening is that Bitcoin, for example, as the main one, the best known one, is actually climbing from its lower value, nowhere near the $60,000 that it was, but it is actually climbing. My point about it is that people are now, I've been talking to people in London who are actually saying this is now a valid it's a valid asset class, and it needs to be looked at. That isn't you've got to understand it. You've got to read about it. You've got to be knowledgeable about it. But you don't need to worry about the detail, the geek detail of it. As more and more people use it, it will come into its own. And this is not government cryptocurrencies. These are international cryptocurrencies, which are still a mystery to many people, including me, I would say. And I don't actually count them right now. But if they are becoming an asset class, which they clearly are, then it will be a metaphor for a warmer crypto winter.
Well, thank you very much, Michael Wilson. Now, for business updates across the African continent, Rochus Odiri is here with us. Rochus, good morning.
Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Mr. Finney. Good morning, Adeswa. Good morning to all our viewers. Yeah, we begin in Nigeria. The Nigerian Upstream Regulatory Petroleum Commission is it's suggesting that a state of emergency for the oil and gas sector be declared with respect to the level of oil theft that's been going on. Benga Komolafe, who was represented by Abel Nsa, head of the National Oil and Gas Excellence Center Department at the NUPRC, stated this at the Association of Nigerian Energy Correspondents Conference in Lagos yesterday. So here's a quote here. It's pretty short. It just says the imperative is on Nigeria to declare some sort of emergency in its oil and gas sector. So I guess better late than never on that front. So now we're facing this double whammy of fuel subsidies, and then you can't even, which is costing the nation trillions, and then you've also got this issue with oil theft that is not even allowing us to bring in the revenues that will allow us to offset those costs. So it's pretty heavy. Again, we've been saying this over and over again. Something has to be said to where Nigerians need to be told what costs they'll be facing if and when this subsidy is removed. To tech, MTN Nigeria has kicked off 5G pilots in 7 states: Lagos, Port Harcourt, Maiduguri. I think a number of other, about 7 states in total is where they're going to be piloting this. So remember, they've got the auction. They won the auction for the 5G spectrum, and so they're going to be rolling out. Now, if you look at broadband penetration across the country, you wonder about the, I guess, infrastructure limitations for telcos here that are trying to get internet across as far as possible. So South Africa, 113% is their broadband penetration. Egypt is 74%, Kenya 48%, Nigeria 43.6%. So that, of course, needs to improve if you want to get, scale 5G across the country. You look at the number of states with the highest internet subscribers. No surprise, Lagos leads 17.84 million. You've got Ogun, Kano, Oyo, the FCT, Kaduna, Rivers, Delta, Edo, and Niger. So you also want to hope that there's not going to be a disparity between the commercial capital of the nation and other states that don't necessarily have the internet penetration that Lagos and a number of states have. So that's something that to be looked at. But again, we push on with respect to 5G. Still in West Africa, in Ghana, the Environmental Protection Agency ran a survey that, no surprise though, Accra tops noise pollution in the nation. So if we took a look at the last 3 years, there's some data that they put out, the head of the Environmental Protection Agency. So 2021, they got 271 total noise complaints. Accra led the way with 65% of them, other regions 35%. In 2020, it was 235 complaints that were received. Accra still led the way, 50.2, other regions 49.8. It was kind of close, and I think maybe COVID has something to do with that. Because 2019, there was 244, and then the disparity of about 60 was 61 to almost 40% for the other regions. Noise pollution is an issue, and there are studies that have shown the long-term effects on humans with respect to noise pollution. I remember it was former Lagos State Governor Fashola who attempted to try to, tamper down on, religious centers, because that's the same thing in Ghana, where they are the primary sources of the noise pollution that we are seeing. But it's something that needs to be addressed with respect to how they are impacting businesses and so on and so forth. From Ghana, we go to Kenya. The National Hospital Insurance Fund, the NHIF, they've dropped a plan to use salary tiers to receive insurance premiums. Basically, if you're earning over 100, initially they plan to increase the insurance premium payments for people who earned more than 100,000 shillings. If you would pay a higher amount. If you earn more than 200,000 shillings, an even higher amount. If you earn more than 500,000 shillings, an even higher amount than that. But there was a parliamentary petition that was submitted and stopped them from doing that. One has to ask, if you look at how health insurance premiums are supposed to be funded, it's mostly taxes, and if you're not using a tiered system where the top earners are paying the most, then how do you fund your insurance? How do you fund your insurance system? So anyway, they've dropped it and they will not be pushing forward with that. And then finally, in South Africa, there's a bit of a fight between the regulator, the Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, and plant-based meat-producing firms. Essentially, the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development said that plant-based companies that make food, or rather plant-based meats, cannot use names associated with meats for their products. So you cannot make a plant-based hamburger and use the word burger, or use the word sausages, or use the word ham. So initially they directed their food safety agency to go and seize any plant-based products that were on shelves in South African stores if they had names that were similar to what are already established processed meat products. But a last-minute court injunction, this was out on Monday or Tuesday, a court injunction from the Johannesburg High Court stopped them from doing that. So right now their guns are all cooled, but there's possibly a further legal fights down the way. And that's our update for today.
Okay. I mean, Mr. Komolafe asking for the declaration of a state of emergency on crude oil theft in Nigeria would seem to make sense.
Yeah.
Stakeholders in the industry in that sector have been asking for the same thing since January. Governors have also raised considerable alarm. Indications are clear as to the extent to which crude oil theft amounts to clear sabotage, economic sabotage for Nigeria. The most embarrassing illustration of this would seem to be the seizure of a vessel, stealing, carrying away, cutting away 300,000 liters of crude, amounting to about $300 million on the high seas around Equatorial Guinea. Nigerian Navy claims that it was due to its own diligence that it was able to intercept that vessel. But that's not true. It was due to the intelligence efforts of the authorities in Equatorial Guinea. So, on our course, Nigeria seems to have failed to be able to check this crude oil theft, which affects revenue, as you pointed out. So, to declare a state of emergency, what does it amount to? What it amounts to, in my view, would be greater vigilance on this part of the same state authorities. The Navy, the maritime authorities that we have, our capacity to monitor, monitor and secure our maritime zone, to make sure that people don't just bring tankers and vessels and bring all kinds of things into Nigeria, and they will operate using technology, steal our crude, and then take it out. And yet internationally, we're told things like fingerprinting, things like, Lloyds, monitoring the movement of vessels around the world. Open intelligence that the Nigerian authorities have not been able to make use of. For that state of emergency to work, if the call by Mr. Komolafe is heeded, there must be the political will to see it through. And the political will is important because of the indication in the reports by both local and international observers that there is connivance between, Nigerians and those who steal our crude oil. It's not. There's an organized mafia, according to one report, that is behind crude oil theft. Would the government of the day or of the future have the courage, or the resources, or the wisdom to tackle that organized mafia that is sabotaging Nigeria and causing hardship both within local environments and to everybody in Nigeria depending on oil revenue? That is that about that. 5G, yes. Since we started this telecom revolution in Nigeria, which everybody praises, we moved from 2G to 3G to 4G to 5G, which we're told has many benefits, okay? Faster speed, better access to data, and all of that. And this is all within the context of the efforts of the government to promote digital economy. And it's good to see that the rollout is, coming up, considering the fact that at a point, some uninformed persons, including some pastors, deploying the tactics of hypnotism, told people that 5G technology is responsible for COVID-19.
Yeah.
I hope such pastors will have the confidence now and the humility to go before their congregation and say that according to science and common sense, 5G is now in Nigeria, but it is not the source of COVID-19. Right. But that is an aside. Now, the Nigerian Communications Commission licensed 2 companies.
Yes.
MTN and is it Mafab Communications?
Yeah. Yes.
To roll out 5G. They gave a deadline of August 24. Now it's only MTN that is meeting that deadline. Mafab Communications has asked for a 5-month extension. We're told that 5-month extension has been granted because Mafab has the license, but it does not have the operational license. Now, I see some kind of monkey business here.
Right, exactly.
And I think that the Nigerian Communications Commission should be called out. Who are the people behind Mafab Communications? How did they get the license? Why give them the license if they do not have the capacity? I hope that after the 5 months, they are not going to, Mafab Communications will not come back and say again that they need another 5 months. That will be an exposure of, the tendering process in Nigeria. Okay. Beyond that, MTN is having their own rollout. I think, okay, the public will have serious expectations, and I think it's important that the MTN provides the necessary information so that Nigerians who want to access the service will know how to go about it.
Indeed.
Because when we had the 4G rollout, many people did not know the details, and it was quite a source of nightmare for many phone users in Nigeria.
We actually have MTN coming on the Global Business Report this morning. So we'll discuss that in depth. Yeah, okay. Indeed, Mr. Ifeni.
Okay, well, vegan and regulators in South Africa.
Yeah.
Why do people want to flatter to deceive? If you are producing veg, just say so. Don't pretend.